Fearless, Chapter 4. It begins on page 21. The gulls wheeling overhead were the only company Diggory had as he walked the empty road. He looked up at the bright September sun and the wash of blue sky and took a deep breath of the salty air. He tried not to think of his nightmare or how fearful he felt as he walked alone. He would have to pretend to be brave until he got to Plymouth. "I know I will find Father," he reassured himself, "and we will return home together." He would focus on the light and push away all dark thoughts. It was the only way he could go on. The road itself was not much wider than a footpath, and soon Diggory was walking at a good clip. He hurried past the Cornish hedges of stone that outlined hills covered with gorse so golden it hurt his eyes. He heard rooks in the elm trees and the song of wrens in the blackthorns. He walked over cliffs that looked down on the black pebbled beaches edged with ribbons of white foam. He passed by a field of heather that was such a startling haze of pink it made his heart sing. He stood aside to let an old gypsy shuffle by, leading a pack of goon hillies, laden with sacks of tea. Their saddles were decorated with brightly colored ribbons and bells that made a pleasing tinkle as the ponies tripped lightly over the stony road. By midday, Diggory was hungry, and he stopped by a low, moss-covered wall. He sat down and removed a small pebble that had stuck in between his swollen toes. It felt good to rest. He took a drink from his flask and cut a piece of the fish from the sack. The air was still until a low whining sound broke through the quiet, followed by a sharp rustling in the bushes. Diggory froze. Was it a highwayman? Was it a smuggler? As the noise grew louder, he imagined a bloodthirsty scoundrel preparing to attack him. He reached into his sack and gripped the knife's handle. He held his breath and watched as the bushes stirred, and suddenly a sad, shaggy brown face appeared, looking back at him. It was Fishbone, the village stray, who slept under boats, took his meals from the gutter, and drank from mud puddles. Diggory had always thought Fishbone was the most noble and friendly of the dogs, and he couldn't have been happier to see him. "Fishbone!" Diggory cried. "What are you doing here?" He jumped off the wall and hugged the scruffy dog to him. He pulled the bread from his sack and broke off a bit of the crust. Fishbone gobbled it up and licked his hand clean. "It's all I can spare for now," Diggory said. He picked up a stick and threw it. Fishbone ran for the stick and brought it back, dropping it at Diggory's feet. He panted happily as he sank down beside Diggory to rest. "You've come a long way," Diggory said, stroking his matted fur. "But Plymouth is farther still. Are you sure you want to come along on such a long journey? It's not to be easy, and there's no guarantee of what victuals we'll find along the way." Fishbone put his head on Diggory's knee. "You're on your own, just as I am," Diggory said, scratching the dog's neck. "But together it won't be so lonely, will it?" Diggory cocked his head, whined twice, and then barked. "Then it's settled," Diggory said. "You're coming with me." And together the two started happily down the road. Fishbone stopped every now and again to sniff a mole's burrow or lick a clump of manure. But as they rounded a sharp bend at the crossroads, the dog began to snort and growl. Then he sat down and refused to go on. "What is it, boy?" Diggory whispered. Fishbone looked toward the trees and answered with a loud, steady bark. Diggory looked around uneasily. "Come on, Fishbone. There's nothing here." "Come on, let's go." Diggory took a few steps forward, but the dog wouldn't budge and continued to bark. "Oh, all right, be stubborn if you must, but I haven't all day to wait here," Diggory finally said, nudging Fishbone out of his way and walking ahead. But as he came to the bend in the road, Diggory heard the loud creak of a chain and the flapping of wings overhead. Looking up, he stopped dead in his tracks, too horrified to move. For there, swaying in the breeze beside the road, was the reason for Fishbone's warnings. It was a rotting corpse, swinging from a wooden crossbar, with two large crows pecking away at the eyeless head.